What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Thinking Man's podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joseph PIRCHER. With me, as always, my good friend Tommy Stiles. What's up, Tommy? How you doing, man?
Back at it again.
Back at it. Um, so before we get into it, actually, I think we got to start making a habit of mentioning the Facebook group,
Nice.
mentioning all the links below. Tommy and I offer online coaching. So all that stuff is below, guys. Check that out. Make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave us a comment, let us know that you're paying attention. We appreciate it. And with that, we're going to start. I know that Tommy specifically wants to touch on a topic that's relevant to him right now. He's coaching a handful of athletes that are getting ready for shows this year. And so we have a specific topic that we're going to touch on. And then also, I think Tommy, at some point, and I are going to touch on the Arnold coming up because at the end of the day, Tommy and I are fans also. And then anything else that we might get to. So again, guys, check out the Facebook group. Give us all the engagement numbers on the YouTube video. And then other than that, Tommy, let's get rolling. What did you want to touch on? I know that you have some guys that are looking at making weight classes this year, whether it's in different divisions. So where are you going with this?
Yeah, so with obviously classic physique, height and weight is it matters. And then depending on if you're an open bodybuilder and you need to make weight, or you've kind of maxed out your frame and you need to stay in a weight class. A lot of different application. There's no black and white to what I'm talking about, but it is something to bring up, because depending on how close you're getting to your weight cap, I have a guy who's let's just say he's only going to have about 5 pounds left to where he maxes out his weight cap coming out of this prep. That matters when you break down your whole year. Like I can't let that guy get 30, 40 pounds above his weight cap, because it's going to take too much away from the quality of the prep, because we're going to spend the bulk of the prep losing weight. Whereas it might behoove us to keep within striking distance closer, maybe only 15 to 20 pounds above that cap, and then gain like a recomp effect into prep and be able to hover and kind of hang on that sweet spot right above your weight cap. I think if you have enough tissue and you're one of these people that's going to be close on weight, whether you're open bodybuilder or classic physique, I think you should try to stay above the weight cap for as long as you can in prep. And that's where things like refeeds and pulling back on cardio, maybe some of your gear choices matter when it comes to like if I see someone who I know is going to be close, but we start dropping too quickly, that's when it's almost like pulling the reins on a chariot. You want to slow the prep down, because the end line's here. I don't need you to make weight here. I need fat loss to be progressing, but I don't need to put you 10 to 15 pounds under your weight cap. That's not going to help the overall look. So just one of these things I've been noticing with my guys, that I'm working with classic physique guys. And then I got some open bodybuilders who I know are going to be every quarter pound matters when it comes to us making weight. These guys are going to be maxing out a light heavy class. I got a guy next year who's going to be skin of his teeth. We're going to be making weight. And that's just because of how much tissue he holds. So the thought process for him, it doesn't start at the start of prep. It starts months and months in advance, because it's man, if we got to make 198 and a quarter, 230 is probably your benchmark. I'm not letting you get heavier. And that might make your off season look a lot more active than somebody else's, like me, who's I don't have a weight cap, dude. The sky's the fucking limit. Or a younger lifter who's hey, you just need, you're a lightweight. We need to be a light heavyweight. So just eat up for the next 3 years. So I think knowing where you fit into that, and knowing, at some point along your journey, you're not just chasing blind mass. We talked in the last episode about building the foundation, putting on as much size as you can. Once that's done, then it becomes a little more of a detailed approach. And you can actually hurt your look. You can hurt your physique if you keep chasing blind mass too long. And I've experienced that with having to fix my waistline because I was starting to push it in a negative way. And then you can also ruin your shape, your flow, everything that goes into bodybuilding that isn't just size related. So I think, having a coach who can kind of steer this map for you and program the ship to go in a certain direction is pivotal. I mean, I wasn't making these decisions for myself. I'm still not. I have someone who's, Dom he's the captain of my ship. I don't have to think about my own process. I just have to execute the plan he gives me. And I think, I'm not to sit here to say no one can self-coach, but I come across people who have questions, and the type of questions they're asking is like, I understand you want to learn, but how much time are you wasting trying to learn when you could just turn the reins over to someone else? Probably learn more and spend less time spinning your tires potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to making making weight and having a weight cap and all these things, it's a difficult thing to manage as a coach, because a lot of the times the look that you've identified as a best look is often heavier than what the weight cut is. So like you have somebody that can be, let's say that their best look in the light heavyweight example, there's a lot of times I've seen people that their best look is maybe 203 or 204 or something like that. And then it's like, let's just drop the 6 pounds and get to light heavyweight. You'll be right at the top of the class. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes you wind up just compromising your physique to a point that, you're less competitive, whatever that means. You're less competitive because you just didn't bring your best look, which is a bummer. So I think
we saw Aaron Clark win the heavyweights at USA's he talks about it as a 201 pounder, and he didn't suck into light heavies because he liked how he looked, and it paid off. So
yeah, John won the heavyweights at USA's, and he was only like 208 or 209, something like that. And he was like, hey, let's just ride it in and bring the best that we can. And I think too, we've seen Sean Clarita do the open a couple times, and that's a similar scenario for him because even in 212 that he can kind of just bring whatever the best look is. But really in the open, like seeing him kind of push it a little bit has been cool. So I think that's all that is. They're good takeaways, and I think they're pointed because a lot of people now are going to be doing classic where there is a like a specific weight class that you have, a weight cut that you have to make. And that's all the way up to the Olympia level. So, I think your comment about staying relatively lean in the off season and just having a different looking off season is such a good point too, because not only do you have to have that in mind, but then how long is your off season? Like how strict is your weight limit that you need to get back to? How much muscle can you realistically put on in an off season? Like what type of responder are you? And then when are you competing again? Like if like you said, like if you're going to eventually come back down to light heavyweight 198.5 or whatever it is, and for sure, like you're not going to put on enough muscle to be 230 on stage. Yeah, you should probably only be 230 in the off season, especially if you're going to turn around and compete 12 months or less from that point again, where you were 198. Man, it's the timeline just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if you do like Tommy or I do, where you take dedicated time away, like 18 months, 2 years, 2.5 years, you can have you can get further away from that stage weight or that stage look. You could get to, talking male bodybuilders, you could get to 40 or 50 pounds over what you think that you can be on stage. Just knowing that you have the schedule in your hands the whole time, and you're going to have to schedule out a longer prep at some point. But yeah, I think those are all good points. Anything else that you want to touch on in terms of that, or anything else bodybuilding wise?
I think the weight cap can it can have an effect on how you peak someone too, whether you are able when you can start loading. I mean, if you've got someone who's barely making weight and that the weigh-in's not till the Friday for a Saturday show, you know, you're probably low carb and you might even be manipulating water and sodium just to make that weight. And then, so we've talked about in previous episodes of like running practice refeeds and, you know, a few weeks out, being ready 2 weeks early. Some of that stuff might get tossed out the window when you have somebody who it's like, hey, we're making weight by decimals.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that like that you're making weight, but you're in shape, you're fat free, and it's like you're skinny your teeth, like go shave your head real quick because we need to lose that weight. I'm as I plan out a client's peak week right now, and I don't know when this episode will come out, but it's definitely like something I'm tracking his weight all day after meals, after how much water, where's his weight at, because it does, like, there's no magic in peak week, but in this particular case, there's a lot of, introspection and things I have to account for as we move across the week. Like, are you flying? When are you flying? What's that going to do to your weight? We got to get it down. You know what I mean? Like, so that final week for sure, when you have weight caps in play, like it can be a wrench. Knowing that you can get someone below weight and then you're able to feed them back over their weight cap and keep them on that fat loss phase. So that's where it becomes like a game of, pushing and pulling. Like, say I have a cap of 220, I get a guy to 217. I'd probably want to feed him up a couple more, or like back up to 221 and then push back down again. And then, because at some point too, you have to look at the overall package. Like, do I really want to push a guy whose cap is 220 all the way to 203? And if that's where he has to be fat free, then we're probably wasting our time competing, honestly, at that point. Like, we shouldn't even be on the stage. But just something for people to think about. And, clients working with coaches, it kind of gives you an idea of like, it kind of can help guide your own competitive plans. If you understand what your weight cap is and know that, like, man, I still got 20 pounds to my weight cap. Is it even worth it to spend the money and take the time away from growing to compete, knowing that you could be standing next to guys 20 pounds heavier than you? And that's what's always led the decisions for you and me to be like, do a show, this is a checkpoint. This is what I look like at this time.
Yep.
Back, 18 months off, I'll see you, at the next weight class, or 10, 15 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
So it's just another tool in the toolbox for people to use as a metric of how to plan out their competitive careers.
Yep. Yeah, all great points. All things that really would just be so much easier and done so much more thoughtfully with a coach. I wish at 21 or 22 I had a coach that was like laying out long chunks of organized strategic planning. I think I think things could have been different for anybody that does have that early on in their career. All right, but I think I don't know how much I have to add to that. Let's talk Arnold.
Arnold. It's shaping up to be a good one.
So we have, what do we have? Less than 4 weeks, is it?
3 or less now, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, the amateurs, I got a guy doing the amateurs, so I know that date.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, we're like 19 or 20 days out now.
Hell yeah. All right.
Well,
So
at the time of recording.
most recent update that I saw is Samson back double. He posted a video of him getting into a back double and a back lat spread. Did you see the video that I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right.
It looks like there's a new level of conditioning already. You can see more separation in his hamstrings and glutes, and even back separation too.
Yep.
I think, that was a guy who just probably needed more time dieting, and
Yeah.
you get better.
Yeah, you have that long diet where you pretty much he dieted most of the year last year. You get that nice like kind of body fat break where he probably had 2 weeks to kind of just pig out and eat whatever he wanted, and then you quickly again pull it back down. Um, it's just timed out well for him. He's just got a ton of momentum. Like you said, I think I think in this video here at 3 weeks out, there's like some glute lines that I don't even think that he's had on stage before. Which I think for him, when you're a professional like this and you're kind of running the circuit from one pro show to another, and these same judges see you time after time, I think a big part of how you place is, of course, how you look compared to the other guys on stage, but also how you look compared to your prior self. So I think
Mhm.
if he's much better, even though he's never going to have the most striated glutes on stage, if they are more striated than they've ever been, and he's the best that he's ever been, I think that might go further than it is for someone that generally kind of brings the same thing every time. Um, Interesting. So we have Samson, we have Nick, obviously, and then we talked about the Arnold a while back, but I think since we talked about it, Big Rami has entered the chat as well. um, so what do you think, man? Where are you at with everything?
Well, I think the ceiling, I mean, if we're playing, like, in my opinion, Rami can't get worse. If I'm a betting man, I'm thinking there's no way he brings a worse package than what he brought to the O.
Okay, that makes sense.
So I still think um there's so much muscle there. It's hard to see him out of the top five.
Did you see his most recent update? Chad posted a photo of him, a back double of him.
Yeah, I didn't take a lot from it. Like, if it was a video, I might have given it more merit, but like
Fair enough.
screenshots, and that could have just been that day and that lighting and that training session that he took it after. It was just, I don't know. I don't give a lot of it's tricky with Instagram, and we've seen guys that look great all the way into the show and then end up in ninth. So I didn't take a lot from that picture alone. Rami's a wild card. I think, truthfully, I think it's Nick's show to lose. If I had to put money on someone, I
Fair.
just think he had the best condition at the Olympia, and I think he probably had the ability to give his body a little more of a break, rebound a bit, and then pull back down to where you're going to see an even harder, tighter, more separated, streamlined look. Like, I'll give Nick credit. I mean, every single time he keeps streamlining his look and getting more muscle separation and making his waist, which is his not a strong point, stronger for him in some of his shots. And if he's just hard to look away from on stage because there's so many, the conditions spot on, size, he's shorter, but he's packs a lot of muscle per square inch. And I just think that's hard to stand next to. Like, he's not leaving anything undone when it comes to what he can do, and bodybuilding's all offense. So, Nick is the front runner in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't really argue with any of that. And I think too, Nick has the freak factor. I know that's kind of a vague term, but in open bodybuilding, I think there is something to be said for just having like knockout body parts and shots. And he's got them. I mean, his arms are out of control. His back double, I think, is a knockout shot. His side shots are wild. His most muscular is out of this world. So I don't disagree. I would have Nick. I would have Nick as the front runner. Um, so we have Nick. We have Sean Clarita. we have William Bonac, we have Andrew Jacked, we have Big Ramy, we have Samson. So if I'm a betting man or kind of setting some predictions, I think, like you said, Nick's kind of the leader in the clubhouse or the favorite going into it. I've seen a lot of people that have commented that they expect a top two of Nick and Sean, being that Sean is somewhat similar in stature to Nick. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Clarita is a freak in his own regard. Like, he's unreal with we talk about, height, but when you talk about muscle per square inch and density, he just packs so much on each body part. But this is a big lineup, man. There's some fucking giants. I mean, he's gonna be almost 100 pounds less than some guys. I feel like 80 is.
Samson's more than 280 on stage, and
Yeah.
Sean's less than 180.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I've seen.
Tommy, I'm sure is above 280 as well.
Yeah, so at the very least, I mean, he's given up 80
Andrew
pounds.
Jack, now that I think about it, is easily above 280.
That's what I'm saying. There's some mongoloids in this show alone. So I just don't, it's hard, if these guys, the thing where Sean excels is he'll be peaked and he'll be full because he doesn't have there's no.
He's going to be on the money.
Yeah. And same thing with like Matt Jansen he gets his guys nailed every time. He doesn't miss with these guys. So when we look at like an offensive approach, he's going to do everything he needs to do. It just is a matter of what did everyone else do? If the door's left open, I absolutely could see, if Ramy, Samson, Andrew, if they come in sluggish or they miss their mark, they miss their peak, whatever, like, and I mean, it's the Arnold. So the posing round is scored too. So there's another twist to this show in particular. Sean's a pretty good poser. He presents his physique well. So, Andrew Jack is not a good poser. Admittedly, he's new to all this. So that will hurt him, along with,
I would say Nick's an improved poser as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And Samson's a great poser. He put together a very crisp routine. Ramy, not the best poser.
I'll say this for Sean, my perspective on him, I think at best he's second. I think in that scenario, like you were saying, he's always so perfectly peaked, and that's a trademark of Matt and his top guys that he really pays attention to. So he has Matt and Nick up at the top, or sorry, Sean and Nick up at the top. And I think they will stand out in that scenario just for being on the money, where they're peeled and full. And I think Sean could be as high as second. I don't think an on the mark Sean beats an on the mark Nick. And I know Nick is going to be on the money. So I think at highest, Sean could be second. I expect that Samson is going to be second, and he's going to be better than he was at the Olympia from a conditioning standpoint. It's not going to be enough to overtake Nick, but it's a step up and really like a rival for Samson to be second at that show. I think Ramy's outlook, if I just had to give like a general synopsis of what I think could happen for Ramy, I think that he will either end up in first or he will end up in like fourth. I don't think that there's going to be a chance for an in-between. I think he's either much improved and very similar to what we saw at the Olympia in 2020, and he wins, or it's not much different from what we just saw at this past Olympia, and he's like anywhere from third to fifth. I really don't expect anything much different from Andrew Jacked. Do you?
I just think he'll be better than the Olympia. He is working with Chris Aceto, so
It's true. Some of these guys,
everyone that we've named stayed with the same coach, but Andrew did switch.
Very true.
So that's a factor. For better, it could be better, it could be worse, but where his conditioning was at and what his trajectory has been, I feel like the runway is set for him to hopefully be better as far as conditioning.
I feel like he could only be better. I mean, to be honest, like from a hamstring and glute perspective, I mean, the only way that he's worse is if he looks like he showed up for a guest posing at that point.
Mm-hmm. I think Aceto's usually pretty good when it comes to peaks too.
Yeah.
From years past. So I think that could, that plays a role when you're dealing with guys that are north of 250 when it comes to that amount of musculature, and every minute matters for those guys. So it's tricky because Andrew also has the least amount of stage poise and presence. So how does that factor in with confidence? Working the lineup, what's his posing conditioning like? Like every show Nick doesn't fade, Sean doesn't fade. If anything, they get harder as they pose, and they're good. Rami, guys like, I think Andrew, sky's the limit in my opinion, but I think Bonak's the biggest wild card that I see because he has so much fucking muscle, and he's one of these shorter guys too, but it's almost like the flow of the muscle has just kind of lost itself a little bit with the frame.
A little bit. When his midsection is off, for lack of a better term, everything else looks off at this point in his career. Everything else is thrown off. When there's times that he brings it in and like his lower abs are very clearly like a chiseled V in his front shots, then everything looks incredible. Like we saw at the Arnold last year. So, and he's, for whatever reason, I know that he's been as high as second at the Olympia, but I feel like he is one of these guys that we've seen consistently nail it more so at the Arnold and on that schedule early in the year than at the Olympia later in the year. So you're right. I think Bonak could definitely be a big X factor. Did you see all that shit about him and his health?
I didn't see the health. I saw some pictures that just came out like 2 days ago.
How did they look?
A lot of freaky body parts.
Yeah.
Like I said, he's got some strong shots because he's, he packs a lot of density per square inch. It's just like you said, the midsection kind of that makes or breaks it for him as far as his presentation. Because I feel like Williams' condition's usually pretty close to spot on more often than it's not. He's pretty hard and separated. The legs were on like a decline, and then they somehow started coming back up. So, last year you could argue that he should have won the Arnold, and they say he didn't because of his gyno. So,
yeah,
and that was against a Brandon Curry, who's a Olympia winner, has placed second. So, Williams definitely, I feel like I had him as a dark horse at the Olympia, and he's definitely a dark horse here to shake up these placings.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there was a lot of people that we respect in bodybuilding that had William as a dark horse.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show you, man, how up and down bodybuilding can be. You're only as good as your last showing. We had all these people had Rami winning, no doubt. I know I was one of them. I had Rami winning. I thought William could be a dark horse, like you said, where he sneaks into the top 5 because he was so good. You kind of fall into the excitement that Chad is prepping both of these guys, and then they both show up and they're off. And then here we are just a couple months later, and everyone's written them off and they're no good anymore. So I'm with you. I think both guys could be much better than the Olympia. I mean, it kind of is it's only up from there. I think another showing as poor or even worse for either guy you'd probably start hearing people suggest that they should retire, honestly.
Mhm.
But on the flip side of that, if those guys come out and nail it, if Rami comes out and nails it and his back looks opened up and better, or if Bonac comes out and his midsection looks better and he's peeled again, it's going to be like, well, these guys are just right back into the mix and definitely dangerous at this caliber of show too. I'm really interested because it's a little bit of a smaller lineup in terms of just the quantity of people. I'm really interested to see some of the actual matchups of people standing next to each other. Like, because at the Olympia we had some of these guys, but I don't know that we had a moment where Rami stood next to Andrew Jack or Rami standing next to Nick even. And we only got Rami and Samson because of the numbers in the lineup. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how some of these guys stack up against each other. Are there any particular matchups that you're looking forward to seeing in that regard?
I think Samson and Nick's a good one.
Hmm.
Samson and Sean too. I mean, I just
Yeah, just to
saw
see
a
the
big
difference.
I just saw a side by side of Sean and Nick, and it's like
Yeah,
Sean can stand there. I mean,
yeah.
he's like that. When we talk about density per inch, that really shines on Sean's physique. Like he just,
And like you said, he's always peeled and always blasting full, like always perfect. And that's very, very hard to ignore on a bodybuilding stage because most of the time, especially with these bigger guys, it seems it's more difficult to peak them and just be perfectly on the money. So when Sean consistently shows up and he's perfect, that I think that really catches the judge's eye.
oh yeah. And I mean, in saying that, William Bonac next to Sean, I'd like to see that. We've never seen it.
We've
So
never seen it. You're right. And
that's
he's and
cool.
by the same token, like you said earlier, I before this Olympia, I would have heralded William Bonac's consistency as one of his top traits. He for
Right.
years he was on the money over and over and over again. And so you're right, man. That's a great because if I'm not mistaken, William started as a 212 pro and ascended into open bodybuilding. So to see him as like kind of an ascended championship open pro, and then to see him stand next to this kind of elevated version of Sean, I think will be it'll be really interesting.
We have it because if they do a 6-man first call out
Right.
after the comparisons and the individuals, what most likely will happen is they're gonna send the top 4 off and keep 5 and 6 there and bring in the rest of the guys. So whoever's that middle tier ends up being on stage the longest for that first day anyway. And so you could potentially see all these matchups depending on who's kind of in the middle of the call out, or at the end of the call out, I should say.
Man, you were mentioning too that this is like a physically large lineup. There's a lot of large guys. We have Akeem Williams in this lineup, and we didn't even talk about
I
him.
was gonna say we've only said like 5 or 6 names.
Man,
Akeem, I've I mean, this guy's taken 6th at the Olympia before. Like
man, freak show.
he could be he's won the Tampa Pro, he's won show, like he's definitely someone who could find himself in the top 5 after the first call out or after the
Yeah.
first day of judging.
Akeem is such a wild card that truly, if I didn't get the chance to watch the Arnold or follow the coverage, and then the following morning you sent me a text and said, "Hey, Akeem won the Arnold," I wouldn't even be totally surprised. I would be
No,
like, "Holy shit! I need to see what he looked. He must have looked fucking insane."
I
But
mean
he
those
is someone that has the tools to win the show. There's no doubt about it.
those side shots, the most muscular, he's got a tight waist from the front.
And like
um
people knock his lats, and even so, I think his back shots, if he's in shape, his back shots look great.
yeah, I mean Dennis Wolf still did well with the same lat insertions, and
And never having hard glutes.
I just think it comes down to like finding that package that works best for you, and then as long as you're not one thing and then the majority of the lineup is another, it may work out. So
Yeah.
who else is there? Is it Justin Rodriguez? Is he doing it?
Justin's in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's another, man, there's two very clear fields of bodybuilder in this lineup. There's like the very compact, smaller guys, and then there's big guys. Like Justin's another really big guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know who he's working with or
I never know who he's working with, man.
where he was at
It's different every show.
Was he like 15th at the Olympia?
I don't know that he got a number.
Okay. I can't remember if he was one above James or he was in that pool of 16, but
yeah.
I mean, he's a guy who can disrupt some places. I know Patrick Moore's doing it.
Patrick Moore is doing it, which is an interesting one because just truthfully, I haven't followed him much the last couple of years. And the last I remember seeing of him was that he was announcing that he was moving to Classic.
Yeah.
And so I remember that being part of it. And then now he's back to Open. So I wonder, is that someone that you followed? Like, has he been training all this time, or I'm
I don't follow him.
What his plan is, or how he looks?
I mean, he needed size before, so I don't see things going well on this lineup. But on the upside for him, I think everyone is probably picking him to be at the tail end of the placing. So sky's the limit. You're like the Cinderella. You can piss on parades.
Yeah, at that point you're playing with house money. So
you're like the 16 seed trying to fuck up the 1 seed.
Yeah. And truthfully, man, I've said this before. I went to the 2019 Olympia, and other than seeing Hottie, Patrick Moore was pretty much the standout of open bodybuilding. Like, really stood out. And then just like you said, like at that point, it was like, okay, he's got awesome shape. He's got some good body parts. His conditioning was really good. He just needs overall size. He needs to be bigger everywhere. And that was through, 4 years ago at this point, and I don't know that he's gotten any bigger. So we'll see. I guess
an injury too. I think he tore his Achilles.
Oh, brutal. See, I didn't know that. So apologies.
Yes.
That's a very rough injury.
So I think there's a lot of question marks as to how that's affected things as far as coming back. But it's definitely
right into the deep end too, because you're gonna know if you're still undersized or not in this lineup.
Well, you are for sure. I think anybody with a brainstem can tell him that.
Like, but how much? Like, did he get better? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends. I mean, you got to play your strengths, and he does have a more aesthetic physique than some of the guys we've talked about. But at the same time, like, a lot of the guys, like Samson has good aesthetics. Andrew Jack has good, like, these guys are mass monsters, but they also aren't, they're not necessarily Marcus Rules either. So
I feel like that was part of what made Rami so impressive all this time, is that yes, he's the biggest guy on stage, but he's also got great shape.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bigger guys in the open now across the board, not even doing this show, that are like, 5'11", 6 foot, who are north of 250 on stage. Like, there's some big fucking dudes.
Yeah.
We talk about classic and how bodybuilding's kind of dying, but like there's still some freaks that are, gracing the top 10s of these shows across the year. A lot of them have turned pro in the last 5 years. Guys we've watched closely because of where we're at in the amateur ranks. But, I think it was the Texas Pro this past year in 2022. Like, the top 6 was all over 250, other than like Kamal, I think.
Right. Yeah. Other than him. Yeah. Quentin is another great example, man. He might have the highest ceiling out of anybody.
Oh yeah, dude. I saw some off-season pics of him recently, looking massive.
Dude, fucking crazy. And I hear any of the guys that see him in person, like any of the Canadian guys, anytime I've ever heard any of them like talk about him on a podcast or whatever the case is, they're always like, dude, he is fucking huge in person. Like, always the first thing that people say is that like the internet does him no justice, and that's usually the case with just about anybody. But when you're talking about somebody that's 6'2" and I don't know, 330 pounds in the off season with great shape, I can only begin to imagine how insane that looks in person.
Yeah, I mean, just in the pics, you can see the front to back thickness at his side quarters and chest, and
Even like the width of
yeah,
the width of the shoulders, like how far away from each other they are. And like
mhm.
he was kind of turned in a shot. And it was like, fuck, man, this guy is like just built, like, I hate this phrase, but he's someone that's built different. Like, I think he is his final form is like beyond what anybody else could really offer, unless we see like a completely peeled Andrew Jacked. I think what Quinn can be is is the highest end of it all, because he shows his skin and everything shows the conditioning. Like, he has striated glutes, he has thin hamstrings, like strip thin hamstrings. He's got it all.
Mhm.
He's got big fucking balloon arms. Like,
Yeah, that dude just needs to keep
just
keep
keep
on
doing
his
it. Just stay
keep
healthy.
keep on his path, man. Don't let anybody change your lane. Just keep
Yes.
your head down. Like, you will be taking pro shows, if not this year, within a year after that, for sure. I think he could take a tier 2 show.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he won, um, something like a Vancouver or Toronto or something like that this coming year. But also, if he were to say, "Hey, I'm not competing this coming year, and then I'm going to do, New York in 2024 to try to win and qualify for the Olympia," I would be like, that's a great plan. Like, you can do that. He might be one of my favorite physiques, man. Honestly.
Yeah, I love seeing the updates. Speaking of New York, there's a lot of younger, newer pros making their debuts there,
Yeah.
or continuing on, who have, like, Nate Spears doing New York, Justin Shires making his debut in New York, Carlos Thomas making his debut in New York.
Wow.
Um, so it's kind of cool to see, especially for I've seen half these guys turn pro in person,
Oh yeah.
and watching them, getting ready for the New York Pro is like, damn, dude, like it's cool to see people that you respect, who are like as obsessed with bodybuilding as you have been over the years. Like, they earn their spot, and they're making, like, the guard is changing. Like, there's a lot of these guys we've talked about, like, Nick's young, but some of the guys are getting older, like William Bonak's older. A lot of even guys that aren't even in this show that we're talking, like, I think of like a Steve Kuklo, like, he's got less years ahead of him than he has behind. Like, there's some names that are going to be recycled out for these newer names. And
Yeah.
that's just kind of how it goes.
Rami, I would say, how long does Rami have? Even Hadi, how long does
Yeah.
Hadi have? Like, uh,
2 years, what I mean? Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
Brandon is 40.
right.
There's gonna be room for a whole nother generation of open bodybuilders.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, guy Stu Sutherland, when Mr. USA is, he's doing the New
Yeah,
York
he's
Pro.
excellent, dude. That guy's fucking killer.
Yeah, he's big.
Yeah.
Um, so it's cool to see. Like, I think that show in particular will be cool. I know Jordan Hutchinson's making his pro debut this year. A lot of cool, like, we talk about the upper echelon, but to see the new guys getting their feet wet and getting in the mix is cool to see too. Like, the opens, it's diverse, especially like you get into the international side. There's freak shows over there. Like, there's a lot of good bodybuilders across the world, and just in America too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
So
bummer that we don't see more of those guys. I think probably a big part of it is just the cost to get over here and then being taxed twice over if you win.
yeah, and visas too is a.
Jesus, true.
I know
COVID
the
was a
Middle
big,
Eastern guys get hammered with that.
yeah, and then I'm sure all the COVID stuff. really put a hamper on it. But there's so many people, man. I remember going to FIBO in Germany at one point, and even just guys that just walked around the expo, it's like, Jesus Christ, like who the fuck is this guy? Like just some unknown dude that's walking around, but it's like if he was in America, he would be a big deal, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it's interesting to see.
Did you see that statue Hottie got in his country?
No, they put a statue up of him.
Yeah, like hitting a front double, massive statue. It's awesome. It's like the Statue of Liberty, but it's Hottie Chupon.
Oh,
Yeah, it's awesome. Check his page real quick. It was like a fist pump moment for me when I saw it. Like that rules. Like you are your country's national treasure.
yeah, dude, no kidding. It's on his page, his Instagram.
I believe that's where I saw it, or I saw it somewhere recently. Maybe it's not on his page, but there is definitely a statue.
Oh, it might be this video here. Man, that and then there's this video of him decline barbell pressing 5 plates. You weren't
Yeah,
kidding. He fucking bangs in the gym.
I know. I was not aware of that until like right around the Olympia, and I started seeing some highlights.
Man, this is just him coming home from the airport, and the video is like you would think that like the president was there. Holy fuck, man, this is crazy.
That's how it was when Rami went back to Egypt too.
I believe it. I believe it. Yeah, man. Man, something like that, man. That almost like gives me chills. I wish bodybuilding was more like that here.
They're the LeBron James of their countries, man. Like they
Yeah.
run shit.
Well, bodybuilding is huge too in the Middle East, like huge on like a per capita scale. You know what I mean? Like we have so many people here in North America and in the US, and it's such a small percentage of those people. There in the Middle East, there's not that many people, and tons of them love bodybuilding.
Yeah, they have like bodybuilding teams that
Yeah,
you join.
yeah,
Very
yeah. And there's a lot of guys that are doing almost like I've heard about there will just be wealthy guys that sponsor like teams of amateur bodybuilders where it's like, yeah, I'll cover whatever it's like a scholarship where it's like you're just going to bodybuild and focus on that, and you have like one of these Badr Budai type characters essentially sponsor you, which is just wild, man. That's a bodybuilding dream right there.
yeah, it's crazy, man.
That's like that reminds me of like this story that I spoke with Reagan one time at the Arnold, and he told me his entire Kuwait story, and it was fucking insane, dude. Fucking insane, off the charts insane. Almost
Like
sounded like he was like in prison.
summer camp, basically. Well,
Yeah,
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 basically bodybuilding camp.
yeah. Scientific fucking chemical warfare summer camp. Um,
Sit around, watch movies, go train, sit around, eat,
that's it.
watch movies.
That's it. Um, but all right, guys, that's everything. That's another one for us. So knocked out 2 in 1 week. We're gonna get back to the usual every Monday schedule. Thanks again for the patience, guys. As I was like kind of coming back from surgery and everything. So that's another episode for Tommy Stiles. I'm Joseph PIRCHER. This was a Thinking Man's podcast. And until next time, we are out.